should we go straight to our guests of honor?
Yes, yeah. Now we have two guests of honor, Gareth Willey and
Chantelle di
Carvalho, and we've got some details about their careers coming up. It's very impressive. We have a film producer, Gareth Willey, who has produced or acted as executive producer on several feature films, 4 of which have been with Woody Allen. He was nominated for a Golden Globe in 2006 for Woody Allen's Match Point, and in 2009, Gareth won a Best Picture Golden Globe for Woody Allen's Vicky Cristina Barcelona.
Fantastic film. And here to lead the Q&A conversation with Gareth, we have creative producer Chantelle di Carvalho, who has produced and narrative and documentary features, including The Hatching, The Secret Philosophy, Credo, Opposites, and a feature documentary called I Am Gen Z. She's just finished filming 3 other feature films, feature documentaries currently in post-production. And Chantelle is a very good friend of mine, so I'm really, really happy to have Chantelle with us tonight. And Gareth.
Thank you, Gareth, for joining us. I'm very excited that I get to ask you a whole bunch of questions. And, we have a limited amount of time. So there were a lot of questions, as Ken was saying, that a lot of you had put together. And I've tried to group them. I've tried to sort of see how we can get the most out of Gareth's time and his viewpoint. So, of course, yeah, as you saw, Gareth's list of credits as producer and exec producer are incredibly impressive. And we saw excerpts there from Cassandra's Dream and Match Point, for which he had a Golden Globe nomination, and Vicky Cristina Barcelona, for which he won the Golden Globe. But of course, he's gone on and he has produced and exec produced diverse films, varied genres, and brought those to fruition and successfully out to the market. So Gareth, can you share a little of your journey from your first foray into the film industry and to where you are now in, a short space of time?
I can. Good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. I didn't start off I didn't start off planning to be a producer. I started out when I was a kid. I thought I was going to be an actor. And I was sitting in a pub when I was 17 years old with an actor who was in his very first professional acting job in a theatre. And there was something about this guy that made me think, if that's what it is to be an actor, I'm not that. So I'd better go to university and study something else. So I went to university and did a degree in business with economics and law. As an aside, it turns out that I was setting my bar rather high because the actor I was sitting in the pub with was a guy called Daniel Day-Lewis. So it's Dan Day-Lewis's fault that I'm not an actor, and it's his fault. It's his fault that you've all got to put up with me as a producer instead. So I did a degree in business with economics and law, left university, tried to go to the National Film and Television School to study producing, and they wouldn't have me. So I went to work in a bank instead, but I never lost my interest in the creative process. And I started out by helping some people put together a very low budget comedy horror film called Funny Man, which is weirdly popular in Australia. I don't know why, but we all have to start somewhere. And that in turn led me to working increasingly evenings and weekends, really. I was working as producing, and then I did a movie in Australia with Guy Pearce and Helena Bonham Carter called Till Human Voices Wake Us, which is one of my favourite little films, actually, and that led me to become known by people who were in the orbit of Woody Allen's team. And after working on his only studio film in I think 2002 or 2003, a film called Melinda and Melinda, he was wanting to get back into working in the independent space, and they reached out to me, and I said if he came over to Europe and I could put a good deal together for him, and that's how we ended up making Match Point. And that was a very happy experience. That meant we then spent 4 years working together. We made 4 films together in that 4-year period. but I hadn't left banking with the ambition of working for somebody else. I left banking with the ambition of working for myself, and having had a very successful period with Woody, I then wanted to use that opportunity to work with new directors, new producers, new writers, and I've spent much of the last 15 years doing that, and I've now decided I need to start working with some on some bigger films again. So to that end, I've got some great projects which are almost ready to go now. Big Second World War drama, which we're hoping to shoot in the former Eastern Bloc in the first half of next year. A romantic comedy that we're planning on shooting in Lisbon, in Portugal, amongst others. So yeah, that's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Well, it's so impressive, and you know, I can only aspire, Gareth, really. But you know, you know, when you look at the process that you have to go through, and I remember you talking to a group of producers, and you were saying, I mean, I paraphrase this and I can never say it as eloquently as you did, but it was something along the lines of, just because you have you have success in producing a film doesn't mean to say it makes the next one easier and the next one easier, and getting into a room with all the right people and getting access doesn't make that any easier each time, you know. So sort of framing it a little bit from the perspective of screenwriters and how they trying to fathom where they fit into this kind of filmmaking lark. I wonder if you were to try and put if you were to sort of tell us how much time and commitment you need to dedicate just to getting a film from inception to completion, you know, what would that look like to you? Like, so what is that timeline and process like?
Okay, well, it unhelpfully, it is as long as a piece of string. I mean, unhelpfully, there is no timeline. I mean, the last 4 or 5 years have been particularly peculiar, of course, because of COVID. So that, for example, I had this romantic comedy that was ready to go. We were ready to go. And then COVID arrived, and then the actress that we had attached to play the lead had to drop out for personal reasons. And then the actor we had attached to play the lead opposite her had personal reasons. And then COVID happened. And that's the one which we were supposed to shoot in 2020, I think. And now we're aiming to shoot it in the first half of next year. So that's been 4 years in gestation. One of the writer-directors I've been working with in the meantime over the course of the last 4 years works extremely fast. I mean, he writes. We've done 4 films together. I don't think we're going to. I think that relationship's come to a natural conclusion. But it's been great to be able to have those films come through over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, because they've been very low budget, but they've been really high production value. But the way they've worked has been an opportunity to bring completely new talent through, not just on in front of camera, not as just writers, but we've been working with film students almost, or just out of film school, to crew up the films. Oh, wow. And one of the reasons that is because all of those young people coming out of film school have only ever been working in film school environments. So they're used to having no time and no facilities. So they're not spoilt yet. So we've been able to turn those films around from the first time a script lands on my desk to me giving notes, turning it around, getting it prepared, finalizing the deal with our sales agent and with the production facilities that we need to make those films, the delivery, literally from the first time a script lands on my desk to delivering to the sales agent in 9 months, which is an astonishingly fast turnaround time. Yeah. But they're not highly polished pieces. You know, they exist for a purpose, which is really as a vehicle for their training vehicles, basically. And it's been very fun to do those because working with people who've just got buckets of vim and vigor and have no idea that it's unusual to be working, you know, from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. They just say, great, you know, we want to do that. But it really is, that's the range. It can be from 4, 5 or more years to less than a year. But it just depends very much on the environment, on the particular project, and it is project to project.
Yeah. And then not to mention, of course, taking care of distribution and keeping an eye on that as it goes into the future.
Yeah, I mean, as a producer, anyone who thinks that their job is done when principal photography ends is deluding themselves. I mean, that's about half the job.
Yeah,
the rest of the job is about organizing. I mean, you know, it's called the film business. It's not the film hobby. Right? So it's about making sure that you receive revenue and you pay back your investors. You know, not in an ideal world, you make a nice profit. And the idea of making that profit, because profit is not a dirty word, is to be able to facilitate making the next project and the next one after that.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on it a little bit there, but and obviously not wanting to go into a huge amount of detail and everything, but broad strokes from just from a sort of screenplay or screenwriter's point of view, from the time that they've worked on their screenplay for years and they finally got ready to let their baby out into the wide world, and say you option their script in a very sort of broad sense. Can you take us through the steps that they would be involved with up until principal photography?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how developed the script is when it lands on my desk and how it has come to land on my desk. It's safe to say that, and I know this is going to be hard for anybody out there who's listening to this, who's a screenwriter and is desperately trying to think about how do I get my script in front of a producer. If it's an experienced producer, it's not going to land on that producer's desk unless it's come through a trusted conduit. And for me, that is either you know, colleagues in the industry with whom I've worked previously, or with whom I've been seeking to work, because it works both ways. It's not I'm not universally known, so I still have to peddle myself to try and get access to good material, or it comes to me through an agent. And when it arrives, it might be that when I read the script, at first glance, I think, oh, I know exactly the director I would take this to. I think it's ready for that stage. Or it might be much, much more rough than that. It might be a fairly advanced draft. No matter how long you've been working on it, it may still feel rough by the time it lands on my desk. And then I'll engage with the writer and say, look, if you want me to option this, you know, you'd have to agree on doing a pass based on my notes. But once it's polished up and we've agreed terms, and I have faith in the product, because at the end of the day, it is a product, and I'm a salesman, for want of a better word. I have to sell the idea to a director. I have to sell the idea to actors, and I have to sell the idea to sales agents and distributors. But once it gets to the stage where the script is highly polished, then the writer's engagement and involvement from that point on is not very substantial. It may be that the director wants to do a director's pass of the screenplay before we go into in front of the camera, or it may be that the director wants to engage with the writer to do a director's pass. But at that point, you know, the lovely thing about working in the independent world is that, you know, if one's been working on a script with a writer for 9 months, 8 months, 10 months, a year and a half, you develop something of a friendship with that writer. So I like to keep my writers involved, but mostly because I've just become to enjoy their company, because I enjoy writers' companies. I find them very engaging and smart people. So, but their active involvement sort of stops by the time when the script is ready to go out into the sort of jungle of sales agents and actors and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I like to have them visit set, and I like to have them meet the actors and stuff. But that's courtesy more than anything.
Yeah. And just judging from what you said about Woody and the 4 films you've just done, 4 seems to be your number, right? So
yeah, I mean, that did occur to me when I was just working with when I was chatting with the creative writer director I've been working with for the last couple of years. I mean, it's not the only thing I've been doing, but we have done this bracket, this sort of like canon of work, this small canon of work, and it did occur to me when I said, well, I did 4 with Woody, so I've done 4 with you, so don't feel offended. And the working relationship with Woody ended not because of any other reason other than I said, and we're still very good friends. I mean, I had dinner with Woody and my producing team in Lisbon 2 months ago, or 6 weeks ago, and it was look, you guys don't really need me anymore. We've moved you out of working in New York. You're now working in Europe. You don't really need me. And they said, okay, well, if you don't mind, then if you want to go off and do your own thing, we understand.
Yeah.
And so I said to my recent collaborator, I said, don't be offended that I'm saying that I think we've done enough together, because Woody got 4 and you've had 4. So.
I know you've given us a sort of idea of how you would find a script and how it would land on your desk. But even within that, do you think that there is, there's no magic bullet for anything, right? But what is it about a script, or what would a screenplay need to have in order for you to be willing to take a journey with it? So, I'm saying people want to know, they're always asking, is it genre? Is it character? Is it story? Is it something to do with, a world event? Or what is it that really tickles a producer's interest?
Well, if you were to look through I think it's 19 or 20 films I've produced now, there isn't really a consistent pattern. I do a horror film about once every 10 years because I do them and then I realize that I don't like horror films, or they scare the shit out of me or something. So I mean, it's not something. It used to be quite straightforward. It used to be that I didn't mind why a script made me cry, but it had to make me cry. I didn't mind as long as I wasn't weeping because it was so dreadful. Well, I couldn't understand why I was reading it. But if it didn't matter if it was funny and made me laugh so hard, or if it was really romantic or sentimental or heartbreaking. But that's I cry easily when I'm watching television. It was a standing joke with when I was married that my wife would say that I would cry at the breaking of a Kit Kat. So it wouldn't take much to make me cry. So but that was the kind of, so some people would say with me that's a low bar. Mm-hmm. But what that's a metaphor is to say that it really has to engage me on a visceral level. And I think it comes back to, because I started out engaging with script as an actor. When I read scripts, I still read them from the inside out. I invariably cast myself in one of the roles, not because I have any Hitchcockian ambition to be on screen. I simply don't. But I can't help but read the script and find the character that I would play if I were in it, and then I read it from the inside out. And when I was younger, I would play the romantic leads, and now not so much. But I think that's just intelligent. So what do I look for now? The 4 scripts that are most pregnant on my slate, completely coincidentally, I haven't done this deliberately, but they're all stories with the principal protagonist is a woman, and it's not because I'm fabulously progressive or woke or anything. I'm not. It's just I don't really know why, but female stories seem to be the ones that come to the top in my reading capacity of late. And in fact, this has even got to the point where a script which I wasn't even looking for, I've started having a conversation with the writer. The originator is a woman, the writer is a woman, the star of the stories are based in a real life historical event from the 17th century is a woman. And I just think, bloody hell, another one. You know, I just can't seem to. So there have been a lot of female stories in my canon. But I think it's got more to do with the fact that I'm kind of bored of the male stories that seem to come all the time. That's very, very difficult to have a fresh and original take on the world through a well-written male perspective. I think that's the reason why. I'm not really very interested in science fiction. I'm not really interested in fantasy. So they have to feel real. They have to really feel real. And the most engaged I've been in the last slew of scripts that have come across my desk have been women's stories.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm ditto. It's something I'm very hot on as well. But do you think that, you know, personal preferences aside, do you think that writers today, if, you know, I mean, you're going to write what you know and, you know, all of that, right? And you're going to have your genre, of course. But do you think in general terms there is a genre or a type of film that is getting more traction these days?
I mean, there are the perennials. Genre films, horror films, particularly smart, polished ones, always sell and do well. But that's not clever or anything. That's not clever or interesting for this audience to hear. That's just a truth. But we are in a complete state of flux, and we have been for a few years. I mean, the rise of the streamers was exacerbated, and their power was exacerbated by COVID because no one was going to cinema. You had to sit at home and watch.
Yeah.
What that's done to the revenue model has been completely to screw it up, because what we used to do was make films, hope for a theatrical release. Maybe we get to wash our face at the theatrical release, and then we make our money from you know, from the home entertainment release later with DVD sales and so on. Buying from the Apple Store hasn't done anything close to replace DVD sales, and the amount of money that the streamers pay for buying your home entertainment version of the film doesn't match. So there's been a decimation of the revenue stream. So the question then is, well, I mean, and I saw today Pathé are closing their distribution arm in the UK because they know they can't make any money out of it. So the industry is in a complete state of flux. So this has done two things. One of course, is it's driven budgets down. And then the question is, well, what does that mean for me in terms of how I can, you know, get my films to an audience? And actually, I forgot what your question was now. I've got
is there a genre?
Oh, is there a genre? Yes, that's right.
Rising to the surface.
So the answer to the question is the conversations I've had with sales agents about this, and they've just all come back from AFM. Have been crying their eyes out because the sales were so poor at AFM, particularly for US domestic. But the smartest and the best sales agents have made the observation that films that are continuing to sell are those films that really know what they are. Right? So don't try and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to make a quirky romantic comedy sci-fi with a dark underlying comedic thread.
Right.
That won't sell because people, the distributors that are left are scared shitless at the moment about buying product that they don't know what to do with.
Right.
So if it's a romantic comedy, make sure it's romantic and make sure it's funny. There's bugger all point in saying, oh no, well, it was supposed to be a bit ironic.
Okay.
They don't know what to do with ironic. If it's going to be an action movie, and I'm talking against myself and you here a little bit, Chantelle, because we're talking about female-centric films, that's fine, but that's because you and I are bored of the obvious male characters. Hate to say it, but the obvious male character films are still selling, because if you're making an action movie about a guy with lots of guns, then it knows what it is. It may not be smart or intelligent or clever, but it knows what it is, and it knows what its audience will be, and therefore the distributors know how to sell it to an audience. So it's a little bit depressing, perhaps, to have to think so narrowly about what you're making. But I would suggest the answer is to embrace that reality. Say, no, fine, okay, let's make a really romantic film. Let's have them crying in the aisles. Fine, no problem.
I think it actually, in a way, is encouraging, because I think when you're sitting there in your room creating, and you're creating this thing that's so on your heart to write, that you really want it to be just just that. You want it to be a romantic comedy and nothing else. And it does get confusing at times when you're being told, no, it just needs a little bit left of center in order to sell. And that, I think, is very encouraging for writers.
Right. And if you're going to make something which is really challenging an art house, there's no problem with that. But don't make it for $10 million. Make it for $500,000. Because then it becomes an economically viable prospect.
Absolutely.
It's be clear about what it is, and be clear you understand what your market's going to be. I always say, if you're going to make a film about the Inuit people whittling whale bones into a flute, that's great, but you've got to understand that that's not going to sell to a cinema.
Right. Yeah.
Probably.
And this is the thing as well. I think there's so much perceived wisdom out there for screenwriters, what they should and shouldn't be doing. And, things like, once you've written the script, how to write a good inquiry letter, how to put a 2-pager together. You should be doing a 2-pager. You should do a treatment, and you don't send unsolicited material, and make sure you've copyrighted. And there's so much of that sort of perceived wisdom out there. It's sort of hard to know what advice to take. And I think people are almost prescribed that's what you should be doing. In your opinion, and the way that you work, how important do you think all those things like the 2-pager and writing a perfect treatment and the right inquiry letter to get out there? Well, how important is that?
Absolutely, completely fundamental. Absolutely fun. The 2-pager, for me, a beautiful inquiry letter is completely irrelevant, because that's not coming to me. The agents that send stuff to me say, hey, Gareth, do you want to read this? I say, do you think I should? Yes. Okay, fine, send it to me. I used to slavishly read the entire thing, and now I don't, because now I've read so many screenplays, and I get Christ knows how many a year, that you can just tell if someone is a competent writer within 30 pages. You just can. It's hard, sounds hard and harsh, but it's true. But a really pithy paragraph, if you can't explain your story, that's why the elevator pitch is so important. If you can't capture somebody in 30 seconds, you can't expect them to sit there and watch your movie for an hour and a half. You just can't. And one of the reasons why the strap line is so important is because you've got to be able to distill the essence of what your story is into that one line. That it really, I know it's, now it doesn't mean that a great strap line makes a great movie. My friends in the industry joke with me that I'm really good at the shortest form of writing, which is titles, strap lines, shit like that. But don't ask me to write a screenplay. I wouldn't know where to start. So, I've got 2 fantastic titles, which are only titles. There's no script to them. So that's not much use. But if you are a writer and you have written it, you need to read, and this is part of saying, if you really know what you're writing, then you'll be able to write the strapline. You'll be able to write a paragraph which completely encompasses your entire film.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then there's a much better chance that you've written something which is going to be able to be marketed.
Yeah. No, I truly believe that as well, actually. And sort of a side, a little bit offshoot of what you've just been explaining there is also, we're given all this these are the electronic things you need to send, and, what you would try and get a literary agent involved, etc. Right? But then we also get told about being good in the room. And there's a lot of really good information out there about being good in the room, and exactly that, how to get your log line, who it is, what they want, what's standing in their way, and how they might possibly get what they want, right? And if you can't do that verbally, then then there's a problem. But how important is it to as a writer to try get in the room, and once you're in the room, how do you not F it up?
Well, I think this ends up being about opinion and personal preference about how the producer or the agent that you're engaging with likes to engage with the material and likes to engage with you as a writer. Very often writers are at their most comfortable when they're talking to you through the page. So it's not unusual to meet a writer that's not very confident or articulate meeting face to face, because that's not that. If they were really that, if they were a show off like I was when I thought I was an actor, then they'd be an actor or they'd be a stand-up comedian. A lot of time writers, and as a producer, and I'm sure as an agent too, you need to be really empathetic to the fact that the good writer's preferred medium is the page, not the conversation. So you absolutely need to be attuned and aware of that when you're speaking to writers. So I don't think it's as important for a writer to be good in the room in that regard. I mean, I've met a handful of writers who I think it's safe to say would be, somewhere on the autistic spectrum, and yet they write absolutely beautifully. And it's about that sort of distance, whereas if you met them, they might be rather shy, reserved, and awkward. And then you read the material, and their whole life comes alive. Yeah. So you, as a producer, as an agent, it's super important that you be attuned to that. Yeah. Producers and agents have bad days too, and it's not always possible for them to be on their most empathetic. But I think that as a writer, you need to be able to. Producers need to be good in the room. Actors need to be good in the room. Directors need to be good in the room. Writers, not so much. Their writing needs to be able to talk for them. Yeah. And if you've let a producer or an agent read your work and they're bowled over by it, then you can relax when you're in the room with them. And that's the strongest thing that a writer will need to do, is to have the confidence to let their writing do their talking. Okay. I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have been in networking situations where I've cringed to my toe tips when a writer has tried to present themselves in the room and just not been able to do it. And sort of, it's, you want to cry for them. And
it's not their job. It's our job as producers to, one of our jobs is to protect the talent, not just to promote the talent, but protect the talent and make sure that they're in a situation where they're comfortable and they can perform at their best.
Absolutely. So I'm thinking we're sort of going towards the end of our Q&A time, but you did mention you have in development, you have the Second World War project and the rom-com, which you wanted to do in 2020 and going to be shooting it next year. Yay. Anything that you've looked at, because I know there are authors as well, novel authors amongst the attendees. So anything that you'd be interested in terms of, would you ever take a novel and get that into development and adapting it for the screen? Is it something you would ever consider?
It's funny you should say that. One of the questions I noticed on the sheet was, do I read for pleasure? And the answer is, well, no, not really anymore, because even when I do, I mean, like there's a wonderful biography of Louis Buñuel's called My Last Breath, which I thought, great, it's a biography. I can read this. There's no danger of me starting to picture this as a film. I started reading. I thought, fuck me, this would be brilliant. I think the biggest problem with books is that if a book is really brilliant, it's probably in its perfect form as a book.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about books like, you know, like Sebastian Faulks's Birdsong, which 2 or 3 people have tried, the BBC have tried to make it. So, I mean, I read that book when I was riding my motorcycle around the south of France 30 years ago, and I've got it on my bookshelf right here. Yeah. And on the back page, I've started listing my cast list for the movie I wanted to make out of it. Right. And then I went back and read it again and realized that this isn't a film. It's in its perfect form as a book. And, you know, all that wonderful book, Perfume, you know, Diary of a Murderer. You know, the film is rubbish. It looks lovely, but it doesn't begin to. I mean, actually, the TV series that they made in Germany of it is brilliant. That's a brilliant adaptation. Oh, okay. But they brought it up to the modern day, and they made it much more about a serial killer murder detective movie rather than being about the internal monologue of the experience of having that incredible olfactory senses. Yeah. But no, I think, funnily enough, I've got a TV series in development which is from a terrible novel. And the novel is it's a pulp fiction beach read. And it's a page turner, but it works as a piece of cinema or television, actually, because it's very thin in terms. It's not multi-layered. It's really very superficial. And I think that's the thing. Most books, I think a novel is the most interactive form of entertainment there is, because you do all the creation yourself. What we make, Chantelle, is we make stuff that we want to present to people, and we show them the finished article. And we don't ask them to engage. We say, no, trust us. We've done all the creative. You just consume it. So I think it's very hard. I think that weirdly, the books that are best to adapt are those which are relatively simple or thin. I mean, like Brokeback Mountain was a wonderful film from a short story. Yeah. Because there wasn't much to it really, except for the emotional honesty of the story. Yeah.
No, I think you've also touched on something there, that one of the questions that people were wanting to try and get an answer from, and I know it's a tough one, is, well, you know, should we be looking more at writing with the kind of episodic story in mind rather than the full feature film experience in mind? Do you think this is just waves and it comes and
no,
it goes?
I think that if writers overthink that, then they start to compromise the honesty of the story that they're trying to tell. Right. I would encourage writers to tell the story they want to tell, and then let the cards fall where they may. Yeah. I mean, I think if you think about it's just gone out of my head, Brad Pitt film from the early 90s. With Anthony Hopkins and the name it's gone out of my head, but I watched it recently, which makes it even more embarrassing. I can't remember the title.
Meet Joe Black. There you go. Thank you.
No, not Meet Joe Black. No,
not
Meet Joe Black. No. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yes,
I watched it again recently, and it was much too much happening in a feature film. But in the 1990s, you were Legends of the Fall. Yes, thank you very much, Tim Old. Thank you. Yes,
thank you, Tim.
Legends of the Fall. Much too much happens, but back in the early 90s, you wouldn't be able to get the prestige cast that you needed if you're going to do it as a TV miniseries. But that is a movie that needs to be remade as a as an 8-part, 1-season limited series, because it would be much better told like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, the BBC's War and Peace, even though it was 8 hours, was much better than any of the films I've seen of War and Peace, but it still felt rushed.
Yeah.
So write what you need to write and let the pieces fall where they may. That's what I say.
I think that's great advice. And that as well is, you know, just sort of trust what you're writing and you know what it is. I think that is the really great advice that's come out of our chat tonight, I think. So I do have to say that's enough out of you, Gareth. But it's just been so lovely to have this conversation. We are it's a real treat for us. We are blessed to have that. I think I'm handing over to you, Ken, for your next segment.
Yes, you are. But could I just leap in? I know we've had a fantastic session with you and Gareth, so much good stuff in there for writers in whatever their discipline might be. But something just occurred to me as Gareth was talking. So I'll put this to both Gareth and Chantelle. And Gareth mentioned that, you know, well, first of all, let me say, most of the screenwriters who engage with Page Turner Awards, I would describe as the thing that the umbrella they all sit under is they're all aspiring. They're all, some are at the start of their journey, some are quite a way through and have written many scripts. Others have had quite a lot of success, but they're all still aspiring and striving and looking for that big thing. And listening to Gareth, he talked about how the industry is in a state of flux. We've now got the end of this writer's strike, and it still seems from what Gareth is saying, COVID is still sort of washing through. There's still a lot of stuff, still a lot of catching up to be done. So is this a good time or a bad time to be an aspiring screenwriter? Is it harder than, and you're just going to have to be patient and let some of this stuff ride through, and then your time will come, or not? What do you think?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, because I'm not a screenwriter, so I don't know if it's worse now or easier or harder. I really don't. I think a lot of people, in one respect, you know, pandemics are always brutal because they don't take any prisoners, and people who've run out of money and have had to go and get jobs doing something else have left the industry. And that's true in every single strata of the industry, whether it be writers, actors, directors, producers. You know, there have been a lot of people who've just been, by attrition, removed from the industry. But the flip side is also true, that there's a lot of stuff which wasn't made, which was getting ready to be made, that was starting to be made after COVID, and then the writers went on strike, and then SAG went on strike. So that's built up a great sort of well of stuff waiting to flood through. I think the fact of the matter is that writing is an art, and it's also a craft. And it's like woodworking. You have to have the natural ability to do it, but you only get good at it by continuing to do it over and over again. You know, you write new screenplays, you throw them away, you write that. I mean, Peter Howitt, who wrote Sliding Doors, is a friend of mine, and you know, we got very close to working together on something. But he talks about when he was writing Sliding Doors, he wrote it in a pub in Fulham called the Crabtree Pub, and he would get home after and he would just read it back to himself, and he was so frustrated. What I've written here is crap, and he would just throw it across the room, and then he'd go and pick it up and he'd start again, and it just got better and better and better because the woodwork got more and more crafted. So I think it's never been easy to be an artist, and it's never been easy to be a craftsperson either. And when you're a writer, you are both of those things. So. No, you know what? I think the thing which never gets easy is if it's like those people who have to be an actor. You know, they don't have a choice; they just have to do it. It's something fundamental to their soul. And if that is you, then it's never going to be easy, but it's also never going to be your choice. You just have to be a writer.
Okay. Okay, listen, Chantelle, Gareth, thank you so much for all of that. We're getting some great comments coming through. So a lot of people have found that very, very insightful and interesting.
I think all of the writers in the room will be saying we have to let out. I love this. Let your writing do the talking. I mean, it's just, I think all of us, we just have to have a big sign printed and put it above our computers. Let your writing talk for you. I mean, that is just a brilliant saying. Thank you, Gareth. It's
Gareth, Chantelle, that's the end of the main categories. We have a little bit more work to do in the screenplay. But look, could I thank you both so much for being so generous with your time and your knowledge and your advice. It's been fantastic. And I know, everybody here listening to it will have been hugely impressed and enthused by what you have to say. So Chantelle, Gareth, thanks so much for joining us tonight. You've been fantastic.
Yeah, and I just want to say, just Gareth, from a screenwriting point of view, and there's lots of screenwriters, there's lots of authors, there's lots of new writers, unpublished writers, there's just a load of writers today. And there's just 3 things that I've written down, because I think when you were saying the kind of what really attracts you to a script, what sort of grips you, what makes you want to read a script. And I've written 3 things down, and everybody's might be different, but 3 things that really stuck to me was you have to have some emotional engagement with that script. And I think that's really, really important. You have to see the human condition, what you were saying. And I think, again, that's really important, because today it's all about human condition, how we engage emotionally as people and humanity. And then the 3rd thing was films, that they must know what they are. So those 3 things really resonated with me. All of us writers here will have resonated with lots of, things that you were saying, but those 3 things I'm gonna, and the most important was, let your writing talk for you. So I'm really very excited about that. I'm gonna have that big thing stuck up on the top of the computer. But I think those are really important, nuggets for us writers to know, that when we're writing a script, when we're writing a manuscript, when we're writing a novel, we really need to know those things, and to make sure that our writing talks for us through the human emotion, through the human condition, and through the films and the books and the stories, that they know what those stories are. So thank you very, very much, Gareth. And thank you, Chantelle, for leading that lovely question and answer session.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much for having me along, and congratulations to all the winners announced and yet to be announced. It's lovely. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm going to let you get on with your evening.
Thank you so much, Gareth.
Thank you very much,
Gareth. And likewise, I'm going to do the same, and just sending all my congratulations to you all. And I will look forward to seeing the list of all the winners when it gets published, Paula and Ken.
Yes, we'll be doing that in the next couple of days.
All right. Good luck to you all.
Chantelle,
enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Gareth. Take care, both of you.
Bye.